Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World and Let's Just Talk, our syndicated radio show. I want to welcome back our expert, who is Dan Parkins, an investment advisor and author of 7 books, 4 of which are Islamic terrorism against the United States. His books can be purchased on Amazon.com. Dan is current events commentator and writes periodically for 20 different news blogs. He appears regularly on over 400 radio and TV shows across the nation. He's also co-founder of the nonprofit veterans service organization called Songs and Stories for Soldier. He also is the co-founder of the Black and White U.S. television network. I want to welcome him back to my show. He's a regular, and you have to go to his website at danperkins.guru. And we today are going to talk about the political spectrum on what's going on in the United States. And he just wrote a commentary, Who's in Charge? Who is in charge? And the headline reads, Biden to the military, shoot it down. Military to Biden, no. Who is in charge of our country? And that's what our subject and what's happening in our country right now. Welcome to our show, and thank you for your service, Dan.
My pleasure. We did the introduction took so long, we don't have much time left.
Yes, we do. I'll give it to you. Don't worry about it. Tell me, Dan, what you think, number one, about what's happening right now. Are we headed to a nuclear situation in our country, especially with China?
No, we're not.
Okay.
We have to keep in mind that it all starts with money. And the Chinese, as a nation, have the highest government debt to GDP ratio in the world. Now, the United States, which is the largest economy in the world, has a ratio of debt, meaning how much government debt there is compared to the gross domestic product. We really have about 115% of GDP in debt currently. Now, we've got a debt ceiling and all kinds of stuff coming up. On the other hand, China debt to GDP ratio is 240%. That means they own almost 2.5, they own, to institutional investors and retail investors, an amount of money that's almost 2.5 times the total value of all goods and services produced in China in a year. And so they don't have, if we don't have the resources to continue to fund Ukraine and all the other things, imagine the amount of resources they don't have just to cover debt service and everything else. There's no money. The other thing that's going on is in China, the government's under significant attack by the middle class for what's happened to their economy, the way people were treated in the pandemic and continue to be treated in lockdown situations, to the point that the people are losing faith in the government, and you could see a significant change in the government. Probably if he continues to be as aggressive as he's trying to be, probably before our 2024 presidential election. Now, the other thing that's not being talked about very much is that China has had a policy for decades, one child,
That's
one
true.
child. And the preferential child was male. And so what we have is a whole generation of single males that are still living at home, even though they may be working,
Right.
and have not expressed any interest of getting married and having children. The extension of that, Kathryn, is that now scientists, population scientists, are saying that by 2050, not that far away, the population of China will be reduced by 50%.
Wow.
Because the older generation is dying out. The children are not getting married, so the growth rate of the population is going backwards. And so the economy of the country is going to change dramatically if over the next 25 years, half of the people that are in China today die. And that's a scary number. So there's a sense of urgency to get things done now as quickly as possible, whether that's Taiwan or to continue to try to intimidate Washington and the United States and other countries around the world, just to accumulate as much power as possible to dominate the world before there's a significant decline in the population of the country.
So my next question is, basically, what's going to happen with the coming elections? Do you really believe that the Chinese are afraid of Biden in any way, shape, or form, and the way he reacts? He's in there. I really believe that he's being paid by them still.
Well, at the moment, I don't have any evidence to confirm or deny what you're saying. I have suspicions that that Hunter may very well be the downfall of Joe Biden and his chance to run in 2024.
Right.
I don't know that to be a certainty, but it would appear that the Democrats took a huge hit in losing control of the House. If you just think about what has happened with the Republicans and in the House and the committees and the hearings and all the people that are being called to face the music, imagine what would happen if the Democrats maintained control of the House. Be a hugely different story. Look at the new $2 trillion increase in the federal spending and the huge tax increases that Joe Biden announced he wants to do this week. Imagine if there was no Republican control of the House.
It would just automatically go through.
Yeah, that's right. And so the importance of that election, even though we don't have a huge amount of power, we have enough power to control the legislative process. And he can give a bill, he can ask for payments, but the Congress has to approve the funding of the federal budget. And so I'm hoping that the Republicans will say, no, we're not going to do this, because if they don't, the impact of that legislation alone will be devastating to our economy and to the American people.
Do you see that things are going to change as far as not only term limits, but people are fed up with having people in the House and the Senate for as many years as they are?
I think that's very possible, but I would suggest, on a hopeful front, that something different will happen. One of the major problems we have in our country is that we are deeply divided. And all you have to do is look at the makeup of the Senate and the House to see how divided we are as a nation. I believe we're divided because one party has tried to dominate the legislative process and control the Democrats
Mhm.
to try and force Republicans to capitulate on everything that the Democrats want.
Mhm.
The problem with that, Kathryn, is it has a massive trickle-down effect. When the American electorate sees that 5 officers of the judicial or the justice system in the FBI and the Justice Department
Mhm.
signed off and lied about the FISA warrants, not once, not twice, not 3 things, but 4 times, lied to the court about the accuracy and the validity of the report. And when it came out that it was false and that even the originator refused to take any money from the FBI because he wouldn't agree to say that it was true. What happened? Those kinds of things. When Hillary Clinton, under a court order, destroys 30,000 emails and computers and cell phones that were subpoenaed, and nothing happened. What the message is being sent to the American people is, you don't have to pay for your crimes.
Right.
Look what's happening. Look what's happening in the cities across the nation where Democratic district attorneys are releasing people, not prosecuting them,
Mhm.
and turning them loose to make more and more crime. It's because they don't think people need to be held accountable. And so I think that the potential coming is that the American electorate is going to want accountability. And that's what I hope that the hearings in the House and the 2 committees will help spur the American people to say they want truth.
Okay, so here's another thing here, because the reason why those people are in office is because George Soros gave them the money that they needed to win. And he doesn't want anybody in office that's going to be good. Let's face
Right.
it. So why is he allowed? This is my question. Why is he allowed and nobody else is allowed to give as much money to those candidates as possible? Tell me that.
It's because what Soros has done has manipulated the system through various nonprofits and political action committees that he has been instrumental in setting up that are within the law of the United States. But on an aggregate basis, when you put all of them together, he's able to contribute significant sums of money to political candidates who agree with what he wants to get done.
Why? How can we change that?
Well, you might have heard earlier this week that your congressman just north of you in Dayton,
I know who you're talking about.
right, has indicated that he thinks that the committee needs to
Investigate him, definitely.
and find out what's going on. So that is the real issue. That's the real power that's going on here, is that
Right.
that Jordan's committee
Mhm.
and the other committee have the forum and the ability to begin to raise issues that were never allowed to be raised when the Democrats were in control.
Right.
And that's why things are in such an uproar, because the Democrats don't like the idea that Republicans are starting to ask the hard questions that they refuse to ask.
Do you see Manchin coming over to the Republican Party?
Well, he said within the last week or so that he wasn't going to support Joe Biden for re-election. And I don't think that if he runs for re-election, that he will, I don't think he'll make the break totally to the Republicans. I see him becoming an quote independent first. But if he wants any chance of being re-elected, he can't stay as a Democrat, not in West Virginia.
No, definitely not. I'm going to take a little break here, Dan, if you don't mind.
Not a problem.
Well, your books are so thrilling and they're so important right now. I think everybody should run out and get the whole series. So where can they get the series?
They can get the series at Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble, ordered through your local bookstore. And it's a trilogy plus one. And I think they'll enjoy them, but I caution people not to start them after 9 o'clock at night, because if you
Right.
do, you'll be
You'll
up
be
all
up
night.
all night, like I
Right.
was, right?
Right. Absolutely.
My book will be available on April 6th, and I have to let everybody know that it is Elizabeth Bromwell, The Case of the Chinese Leopard, staring at you from the wall of China. I can't imagine how scary this book is going to be. It is. So you have to rush out and buy that. We'll let you know. So we'll be right back on Kathryn Raaker's World. And let's just talk. We'll be right back. We are back on Kathryn Raaker's World, our syndicated TV show, and Let's Just Talk, our syndicated radio show, with the guest that I've had for many years and has been an expert on my show. And I remember his first book, and love the publicist that sent him to me, because it's been a thrilling ride for both of us, I think. And but besides, Dan Parkins is not just an author, a commentator, so many things. His Songs and Stories for Soldiers is his wonderful foundation. And the other thing is that he's an artist. He never talks about that. And he is also an investment advisor. So you have a lot, and TV producer, radio person, you're everything. Do you sleep at night?
You'd be amazed at the number of times that people like you hosts ask me, do you ever sleep? And I write a lot of commentary. I write something every week for commentary, or more often, depending on what happens in the news cycle. Doing other things, and I prefer to write late into the night, till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I'm getting less sleep, but I'm feeling more productive with my life. So it's a trade-off that I'm willing to make.
One of the things that has really bothered me lately is that I love this. When Biden went down on the microphone and whispered, I thought I was going to die laughing, because I thought to myself, first of all, he made a mistake in the amount of jobs that he brought, to the situation. And he's taking so much credit for so many things that makes me kind of laugh. And I think the American people have woken up. They're awake now, and they're not going to take it anymore. So what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of months?
I expect to see inflation stay pretty much where it is, around 7%, which is really high. I expect to see interest rates. The Fed has already told us they're going to, instead of doing quarter point increases, they may be going to have to go half point increases, and they have a lot of work to do, because it appears to the Fed that the economy is not slowing the way they wanted it to. We had 335,000 jobs on Friday. They want to see negative growth in jobs. They want to see the economy to slow down, because if they don't, it's the pressures from expanding labor and inflation is going to drive up interest rates higher and higher and higher. Now, Goldman put out a report about 10 days ago. I follow interest rates, and there are, in the Treasury market, the Federal Reserve controls what is called the short end of the curve. That's 1 year and less.
Right.
And they can set policy rates, and they can influence the rates of interest in that period of time. As you go out further in time, the markets dictate. So you have now, what we have is called an inverted yield curve, which means that short-term interest rates, 90 days, are 4.8%, But 30-year bonds are 3.8%, which means shorter rates pay more than longer rates, and that's called an inverted curve. That is a classic economic symbol for pending recession. I don't know how bad it's going to be. So I expect to see more turmoil as the Fed starts raising rates again at a wider margin than what the market has anticipated. And I think that Mr. Biden is going to come under this stupid announcement that he did this week on $2 trillion increasing in the budget and adding all these taxes. Again, as we said in the first half of the show, imagine if the Democrats had control of the House.
Right.
What would happen to that bill and what would happen to our economy? And the stuff that's in the bill to change the tax structure and the budgets and everything else is not going to be productive for the American economy. We can't continue the idea of spend and not have any responsibility for physical responsibility for our actions.
Well, I agree too. So what can people do to change things, Dan? What would your suggestions be for that to happen?
First of all, vote. And I think you should go to the polling places on the election day and vote, unless you're handicapped and having difficulty. But if you're going to vote on an absentee ballot, make sure that the ballot that you're getting is like we have here in Florida, where you have an envelope within an envelope and you have to sign your signature inside and outside. And if they don't match, the ballot's cast away. So I think that's one of the paper, as you pointed out, I think is very important. And when you have this early voting, you know, I look at Pennsylvania, Fetterman, who had a heart attack, who couldn't function in a debate.
No, not a heart attack, Dan, a stroke.
Sorry, he had a stroke. Couldn't function. And they bent over backwards, and he gets into the Senate, and he's there a month, and he's in the hospital for severe depression and hasn't been back yet. What were the people of Pennsylvania thinking about when they knew that this gentleman had a stroke? They could see what he was not doing on the campaign trail, and yet in early voting, they voted for him to be the senator for the state of Pennsylvania.
I don't think there should be early voting. I think it's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous. I mean, I can understand if you're overseas in the military and you have to do it like that, but I really believe that early voting should be outlawed totally.
I agree.
But here's the point. Why is he still in office? Because he is really not mentally capable of being in the position that he's in. And his cognitive and all the other stuff they've said is not well. And he could have another stroke at any minute. Does that mean that his wife is going to take over?
Well, in the Pennsylvania, he has to resign unless, under the election laws, unless the governor can declare him to be incompetent, that he can't handle the duties, and then the governor can remove him from office and replace. But they don't want to do that. The Democrats don't want to take any chance of putting somebody else in that isn't going to follow their agenda. You know, you've got Feinstein out at the moment, and you've got Fetterman out. Right now, anything to pass in the Senate would have to be voted on by the Vice President, Ms. Harris, to pass it, because they can't vote, and it takes a majority. And with those two, they're at 51, but those two gone, they're at 49. So they don't have the majority. And the Republicans have 49, so they're going to need Kamala Harris to vote. So I just hope that nobody else gets sick. Now we have the minority leader from Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, who's in the hospital because he fell at the Waldorf Astoria, and they think he has a concussion, but we don't know what his condition is, so he can't vote. So if you look at it, you're talking about sick and old people are the people that are trying to run our government. I don't think that's what the
No.
founding fathers had in mind.
No, I can't even imagine. And, if you remember correctly, during Carter's time, interest rates were up at 18% because I was
Right.
trying to buy a house then.
Me
So,
too.
right. And, it's amazing that, our forefathers must be rolling over in their graves to think that people are still in office that are, look at, what's her name, that's 89 or 90. And but you've got a president that can't walk straight and falls upstairs and all that other stuff. And he wants to run again? Give me a break. Right?
Agreed. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So, anyhow, what do you think? Who do you think is going to end up as the candidates for the Republican Party? I'm just asking.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball that far out in advance, but if I can take the CPAC convention last weekend and talk and look at that, Mr. Trump got about 63% in the straw vote. Ron DeSantis got about 21%, and then Nikki Haley, I think, got 3%, along with a bunch of others. If you look at it from this standpoint, if the Trump support represent currently 63 to 65% of the constituency in the Republican Party, then that means that everybody else running for the presidency is fighting for 37%. Well, 37%, if you got 100% of that, which nobody will, is not enough to win the nomination. You've got to take votes away from Donald Trump, and I think the supporters are very strong. So it would seem to me that unless something else happens that we don't know about, and I don't know what it would be, but I can't look that far in advance, it would seem to me that it's a fait accompli that Donald Trump is going to be the candidate for the Republican Party in 2024. The other thing is, I have no clue who the Democratic candidate's going to be, other than to believe that we haven't seen that person yet.
So we've run out of time. Sorry, kid. So I'd love to have you on in a couple weeks if we could do that again.
Sure.
That would be great. So where do people go to see your commentaries and also to buy your books and everything? Follow you.
Well, the Anchor website is danperkins.guru, Guru, and then I have and there you could go to Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us, and you can also go to blackandwhite.us. And but danperkins.guru is the anchor to get everything you want to know about Dan Perkins.
For sure. And we want to thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. And thank you for all the things that you do for us and for serving our country. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaakersWorld.com. And also up on our website, you can see all of our other logos that take you into our websites, like Let's Just Talk and the Chef You and I, which is a healthy cooking show. See you soon. Take care.